On the day of the divorce, I suddenly felt nauseous and vomited. I quickly explained, it's just a stomachache. My ex-husband, John, didn't say a word and drove me to the hospital right away. I shouted urgently, get a registration for the internal medicine department. But he walked straight to the Obstetrics and Gynecology department's registration desk. Staring at his back, my mind went blank. The sycamore leaves twirled and fell at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. I stared at the gilded words Sophie Johnson, John Wilson on the red marriage certificate, my nails digging deeply into my palm. The 3-year contract had expired, and even the divorce was set on the autumn equinox, the same day we got married. John was always as precise as a machine. Let's go, his voice came from behind. The cufflinks on his suit glinted coldly in the sun. They were a custom-made butterfly pattern, a birthday gift I gave him last year. I hurriedly stuffed the divorce agreement into my handbag when suddenly my stomach churned. I staggered and grabbed the marble pillar. What's wrong? John's hand suddenly clasped my waist. The warmth of his body seeped through my thin sweater, and I almost bit my tongue in surprise. The urge to vomit overwhelmed me. I forced a smile and said, it's an old problem. My gastroenteritis is acting up. His eyes darkened suddenly. He stared at my pale lips. Let's go to the hospital. No need. I took a half step back and hit the cold pillar. After we sign the papers, we're done. Mr. Wilson doesn't have to, Sophie, he interrupted me, pinching my wrist with his fingertips. My pulse was racing. Do you think I can't tell what you're avoiding? He suddenly leaned in, his nose almost touching my forehead. The scent of cedar perfume mixed with mint filled my nostrils. 3 years ago, before your father's surgery, you vomited so badly in the ward and also said it was gastroenteritis. Those words were like a thin needle piercing my heart. 3 years ago, when my father was in the late stage of liver cancer, I knelt in John's office and begged him to sign the surgery consent form. He said, marry me, and I'll save your father. At this moment, his thumb brushed over the butterfly tattoo on the inside of my wrist, the one he took me to get on the day the contract took effect. He said, this way, you can't run away. A taxi honked by the roadside. I yanked my hand away from his. John, the contract is over. Before I could finish, my stomach cramped. I bent over and retched, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. His hand immediately landed on my back and gently rubbed along my spine, a gesture he often did when I was in the hospital. Let's go to the hospital, his voice was hoarse, with an undeniable force. Before I could refuse, he had flagged down a passing Bentley. The driver was Mr. Smith, who had been with him for 10 years. Seeing me get in the car, he casually handed me a vomit bag from the back seat. It had the logo of Wilson Medical printed on it, the same one I used when I had a miscarriage 3 years ago. In front of the Obstetrics and Gynecology triage desk, I stared at the Sophie Johnson, No. 3 on the electronic screen, my fingertips wrinkling the divorce agreement. John was confirming something with the nurse. His tie was askew on his collarbone. This was the first time I'd seen him so disheveled. Mr. Wilson, your wife needs to have a blood test and a ultrasound, the nurse said, handing over the forms. Her eyes glanced at our clasped hands. Somehow, his fingers had intertwined with mine, and the calluses on his palm rubbed against the mark of my wedding ring on my ring finger. I'm not his wife. I tried to pull my hand away in a hurry, but he held it tighter. John took the forms, and his fingertips paused at the last menstrual period column. Her period is 17 days late, he said, looking up at me. His eyes behind the glasses glistened. Sophie, the last time you had menstrual cramps, I made you brown sugar water. Those words were like a bomb going off in my ear. 3 months ago, in the middle of the night, I was curled up on the sofa. He came out of the master bedroom in his pajamas, carrying a cup of ginger and jujube tea. The cuffs of his pajamas smelled of the essential oil I'd left in his study. At that time, I thought he was just fulfilling his contractual obligation. Now, looking back, those details I'd ignored actually had deeper meanings. Sophie Johnson, No. 3. The moment the door of the consulting room opened, John suddenly leaned in and whispered in my ear, Don't be afraid. I'm here. His breath brushed against my earlobe, cool with the taste of mint candy, the same kind I'd put in his suit pocket yesterday. For 3 years, there had always been mint candies I liked in his suit pocket, but he'd never said why. As soon as the beat ultrasound probe touched my skin, I tensed up. John's hand remained clasped around mine, his thumb gently rubbing the lines on my palm, like soothing a frightened little animal. When a fuzzy image appeared on the screen, the doctor suddenly smiled. "Congratulations. You're 6 weeks pregnant." I turned my head abruptly and saw John's Adam's apple bob violently. His glasses were fogged up. He suddenly grabbed my hand and pressed it against his chest. His heart was beating so fast, like a drum. "Sophie," his voice trembled. "This time, I won't miss it again." The smell of disinfectant in the consulting room was so strong it made my eyes water. I stared at the butterfly brooch on his tie clip and suddenly remembered the third clause in the contract: during the marriage, both parties shall not have children. But now, this little life that the contract had forbidden was quietly growing inside me, like a gentle thorn piercing through all my pretended indifference. The disinfectant lamp in the beat ultrasound room cast a cold light overhead, but the warmth of John's palm on mine burned me. While the doctor was printing the report, my memory was suddenly pulled back to the deep winter 3 years ago. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the sound of snow hitting the window, exploding in my mind. The monitor beside my father's bed beeped regularly. I knelt on the carpet in John's office, my knees aching from the custom-made pattern. He sat in his leather swivel chair, the cufflinks on his suit glinting coldly, the same butterfly pattern as the one on his cuff today. "Sophie, you know what I want. Mr. Wilson." I clenched the surgery consent form so tightly my knuckles turned white. "My father only has 3 months left. You can't exchange your marriage for his life?" He interrupted me. The pen in his hand tapped on the contract. "You've read the terms, right? After 3 years, we get a free divorce, and we won't interfere with each other. The Wilson family's medical team will take full responsibility for your father's treatment." He suddenly stood up, and his leather shoes crushed the butterfly hairpin I'd dropped on the ground. "Or do you think your marriage is more important than your father's life?" The snowflakes melted into water streaks on the floor to the ceiling window. I stared at the family photo on his desk, the young John holding a butterfly specimen, with his late father beside him. Later, I learned that the butterfly was a gift from his mother before she passed away, and my surname, Johnson, in his mother's diary, meant the habitat of butterflies. On the day the contract took effect, John asked me to move into the hillside villa, but he left the key to the master bedroom in the most conspicuous place in the entrance hall. On the third shelf of the bookcase in the second-floor study, he pointed at the wall full of medical books. "There's a copy of your father's medical records. The attending doctor will come for a consultation every Wednesday afternoon at 2. He paused, his eyes sweeping over the butterfly tattoo on my wrist. "There's no mango in the fridge. You're allergic to it." I was stunned. He remembered the food allergy I'd casually mentioned during the interview, even though we'd only met 3 times. That night, when I was cooking noodles in the kitchen, I found the same brand of stomach medicine in the bottom cabinet as the one my father used in the hospital, and the production date was the latest. "Miss Johnson, the master said you're afraid of the dark." Aunt Brown, the nanny, handed me a night light in the shape of a butterfly. "The desk lamp in the study has an adjustable color temperature. The master specially had it flown in from Germany." These details were like scattered puzzle pieces, gradually becoming clear in the last half-year before the divorce. There was always a warm desk lamp left on for me in John's study. Even when he was on a business trip abroad, he would guide me through the video to adjust the microscope, the essential tool for my medical illustration studies. Last year, during a heavy rainstorm, I was trapped in the laboratory. His Bentley waited downstairs for 3 hours. His suit pants were covered in mud, but he only said, "I was just passing by." "Sophie?" John's voice pulled me back to reality. He was holding the printed report, his fingertips sliding over the words "embryo alive." "Do you want to take a look?" I shook my head, and my stomach started to churn again. The night my father's surgery was successful 3 years ago, John stood outside the ward all night. In the morning light, his tie was askew on his collarbone, but he smiled and said, "Your father said that when he gets out of the hospital, he'll teach me how to catch base." Until my father passed away, he never knew that our marriage was a deal. He thought John was my college boyfriend. Mr. Wilson, I stared at the butterfly on his tie clip. Why did you choose me back then? He stopped what he was doing. His fingertips rubbed the edge of the report. The butterfly dissection diagram you drew during the interview, his voice was as light as a feather. The vein pattern was exactly the same as the one in my mother's diary. She once said that if I met someone who could draw such a butterfly, I should hold on tight. Suddenly, the door of the consulting room was pushed open. The nurse handed over the blood test report. Your progesterone level is a bit low. We suggest you stay in the hospital for observation. John immediately tightened his grip on my hand. The calluses on his palm rubbed against the mark of my wedding ring on my ring finger, the ring with the words Sophie and John engraved on the inside, which he designed himself on the day we got married. I used to think it was a symbol of the contract, but now I realized it was a combination of the John in his name and the Sophie in mine. My memories were suddenly interrupted by the nurse's words. Mrs. Wilson, your husband said that you're having severe pregnancy reactions and need to stay in a VIP ward. I'm not, listen to the doctor, John interrupted me. His fingertips brushed over the butterfly tattoo on the back of my hand. The contract didn't say we couldn't have a child. So this time, I have the right to make new rules. The corridor in the inpatient department smelled of disinfectant, just like my father's ward 3 years ago. John helped me lie down on the hospital bed and suddenly took out a small tin box from his suit pocket. Inside were neatly arranged mint candies. Aunt Brown said it would make you feel better if you suck on one when you're nauseous. He paused. Actually, I've known for a long time that you don't have gastroenteritis. The vomiting in the ward 3 years ago was a symptom of early pregnancy. I looked up suddenly and saw his Adam's apple bob violently. 3 months ago, when you had a fever of 39 degrees Celsius, you mumbled, "Don't be afraid, baby," in your delirium. He held my hand and pressed it against his chest. Sophie, I'm not blind. Do you think I didn't notice the pregnancy test you took secretly? The sycamore leaves outside the window rustled, as if telling the secrets buried by time. I stared at the wrinkles on John's suit and suddenly remembered the night the contract took effect. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, smoking. The spark of the cigarette glowed and faded in the darkness, illuminating his hand hanging by his side. There was a tiny Sophie tattooed on his palm, echoing the butterfly on my wrist. It turned out that some tenderness had long been hidden between the lines of the contract, in his ever-present butterfly cufflinks, and in every late night when he left a light on for me. And I, until today, finally understood that the seemingly cold man had unknowingly engraved me and our unborn child into his life. Section 3. The feeling of the bee ultrasound probe sliding on my lower abdomen was like a warm jade. I stared at the butterfly sticker on the ceiling, put up by some thoughtful nurse. The direction of the wings was exactly the same as the tattoo on my wrist. John's fingertips were always pressing on the back of my hand, and the calluses on his thumb made my skin itch. They were the marks left by years of holding a scalpel. The fetal heart rate is normal, and the embryo is developing 1 week ahead of the actual gestational age, the doctor's voice mixed with the beeping of the instrument, echoing in the consulting room. I saw John's Adam's apple bob violently, and his glasses were fobbed up, but he still stubbornly stared at the screen. Is there a possibility of an ectopic pregnancy? Mr. Wilson, you're overthinking. The doctor took off her gloves and gently tapped the position of the gestational sac on the printed form. The implantation is very stable, but the progesterone level is a bit low. You need to take progesterone orally. She suddenly smiled, her eyes lingering on our intertwined hands. Your wife is having such a strong reaction in the early stage of pregnancy. You, as her husband, need to take good care of her. I was about to speak when John suddenly tightened his grip on my hand. His fingertips rubbed over the mark of my wedding ring on my ring finger. I understand, doctor. I'll make sure she takes her medicine 24 hours a day. He turned to look at me, the corners of his eyes red. Just like she watched over my father's rehabilitation training back then. Those words were like a blunt knife, cutting open an old wound in my memory. 3 months before Mr. Wilson passed away, I would boil traditional Chinese medicine every day and send it to the Wilson family's old house. John would always be in the study, drawing butterfly specimens, but when I left, he would put a bar of handmade soap in the thermos, the same smell as the ones my mother made before she passed away. The door of the consulting room was knocked, and the nurse handed over the payment slip. The moment John took it, I caught a glimpse of a silver bracelet peeking out from the wrinkles of his suit cuff. The pendant was a flying butterfly, the one I gave him on his birthday last year. He once said it was childish, but he wore it every day. "I'll go pay the bill. You wait for me here." He let go of my hand, but then immediately changed his mind. He took out a mint candy from his suit pocket and stuffed it into my hand. "Suck on it. Don't vomit." As he turned around, the butterfly on his tie clip brushed against my knee, overlapping with the image of the embryo on the beat ultrasound report, like a metaphor for fate. The smell of disinfectant became stronger. I stared at the pregnant women waiting in line outside the consulting room and suddenly remembered the scene 3 months ago in the Wilson family's villa when I secretly used a pregnancy test stick and saw 2 lines. The moment the morning urine dripped on the test stick, John's footsteps sounded in the corridor. I quickly hid the test stick in the butterfly ornament, but I didn't know that he had seen everything on the surveillance camera. "Sophie?" The doctor's call interrupted my reverie. She was frowning at her computer. "The ultrasound just now showed there's an old scar in your uterus, from a previous miscarriage." I froze suddenly, my fingernails digging into my palms. 3 years ago, just half a year after the contract took effect, I got pregnant unexpectedly but miscarried due to overwork. John was signing the surgical consent form when the pen tip jabbed 3 holes in the paper. Later, I found torn ultrasound photos in his study, each scrap drawn with tiny butterflies. "Yes," I replied softly, my gaze landing on the insulated food container John brought back, emblazoned with Wilson family's private chef, a signature of Aunt Brown's cooking, "but it's all healed now." The doctor nodded and wrote, "Scarred uterus, requires close monitoring on the medical chart, there might be risks in the 3rd trimester, recommend early hospitalization for observation." She looked up at John, who was gently wiping ultrasound gel off my hand with a wet wipe, handling me like a fragile specimen. "Your husband is very protective of you. Earlier, when paying, he bought every vitamin available for pregnant women." The container was opened, releasing the aroma of red date and chicken soup, floating with a few lotus seeds I loved. John scooped up a spoonful, blew on it to cool, and brought it to my lips. The ceramic spoon edge was etched with fine butterfly patterns, matching the set at the villa. "Aunt Brown says this soothes nausea." He paused, his thumb brushing my lips. "Back when your father was hospitalized, I saw you brew this for him daily." Suddenly, I recalled Clause 8 of the contract. Both parties must maintain the appearance of a loving couple in front of elders. Yet John never demanded I act the wife. Instead, before my father, he naturally resembled a true husband. He remembered Dad's blood pressure, drove me to the hospital during storms, and dimmed the study lights when I stayed up late drawing. "Mr. Wilson," the doctor interjected suddenly, "your wife's condition right now isn't suited for living alone." John's movement halted, his eyes sweeping over the crumpled divorce agreement I clutched. "She won't be alone." He abruptly pulled out a room key from his suit breast pocket, placing it in my palm. The embossed gold pattern dug into my skin. "The master bedroom at the hillside villa has always been kept for you." The butterfly logo on the card glittered under the light, identical to the insignia on John's cufflink. Staring at the anxiety he couldn't hide behind his glasses, I suddenly remembered last night while packing, discovering a maternity dress embroidered with Sophie hidden deep in his closet, sized for me 3 months ahead. Turns out, in what I thought was a contract marriage, he'd secretly planned our future long ago. Those overlooked gentleness weren't obligations but his true heart concealed beneath butterfly motifs. Like now, he cautiously guarded my wrist tattoo, fearing any harm, and I finally dared admit, this man bound by contract had planted a love far stronger than butterflies in my heart long ago. The plastic chairs in the prenatal waiting area dug into my back as I watched John's silhouette by the vending machine. He stood on tiptoe to grab a soda from the top shelf, the only drink I could stomach during morning sickness. His suit jacket hung over a chair, revealing butterfly cufflinks on his shirt sleeves. Sunlight through the window grill cast delicate glimmers on the metal, like his tenderness hidden behind the contract suddenly becoming visible. "Here." He handed me the can. The snap of the tab startled the sparrows on the windowsill. "Aunt Brown said chilled drinks can irritate the stomach, so I had her warm it for 10 minutes. Drops of condensation from the aluminum can mixed with the warmth of his palm on my skin, stinging my eyes until they watered. As I traced the tab, I suddenly remembered a late night 3 months prior. I collapsed over my medical illustrations in the study during a low-sugar episode, shattering a palate. John rushed in smelling of hospital disinfectant, his suit pants still wet. Without a word, he knelt to pick up glass shards, cutting his finger but offering me dark chocolate first, always stocked in drawer 3. Now, the waiting room TV played morning news. Wilson Medical donated to the maternity hospital. The camera panned to John in the audience, chatting with parents-to-be. The butterfly cufflinks flashed under lights. I gave him those last birthday. He said too casual for business settings, yet pinned them to his shirt nightly during overtime. Sophie? John suddenly knelt before me, fingertips brushing my flushed earlobe. What are you thinking about? His white coat, now draped over my shoulders, bore the cool scent of operating rooms but warmed with body heat. Thinking, I murmured, eyeing the mole beneath his Adam's apple, when you started preparing all this. My thumb rubbed the soda can, plastered with a sticky note in his handwriting, for Sophie only, room temperature, sugar-free. Identical to the labels on yogurt in the villa fridge. Mango allergy, cold sensitive stomach, fear of the dark. How do you remember these details that weren't in the contract better than me? His eyes softened like melting snow. Clause 3 states both parties must understand each other's habits. He paused, tracing the butterfly tattoo on my wrist, but it doesn't forbid engraving habits into one's bones. Memory yanked me back to a stormy night. I was stuck in the lab revising my thesis, thunder rattling me, phone battery down to 5%. Dashing into the rain with my laptop, I saw John's Bentley parked beneath a phoenix tree. He held an umbrella stamped with butterflies, his suit pants splattered with mud. Just passing by. Later I learned he'd canceled a dinner with foreign clients and waited 3 hours outside the lab. That umbrella still sits in the villa foyer. The spine is etched with a tiny soft, echoing the silver bracelet on his wrist, a wedding gift from me he called childish yet wore daily. Mr. Wilson, your wife's test results are in. A nurse handed over a folder, eyeing our intertwined hands. Progesterone levels have risen, remember to take the medicine on time. As John took the file, I glimpsed skin beneath his collar, a light brown mark above his collarbone from when he applied cold towels during my fever 3 years ago, right after the contract began. Half delirious at midnight, he sat by my bed wiping my palms with alcohol swabs until dawn. What would you like for dinner tonight? He tidied the soda cans from the table, handling them like fragile relics. Aunt Brown said sea-based soup helps with nausea, the dish your father taught me. I looked up sharply. He held a faded sticky note, Dad's recipe from his hospital stay, its corner doodled with a lopsided butterfly. That was the first time I saw John smile. He said, your father claimed catching sea bass required waking at 4 a.m. for the docks, when the sun rises, when shadows move fish with the light. I took the note, its pages water stained as if repeatedly viewed. You remembered. He stayed silent, folding the note back into his breast pocket beside a peppermint tin. Sunlight pierced the clouds, striking the silver bracelet on his wrist. Its butterfly charm rested on my hand like a silent promise. Amid the buzz of waiting room numbers, I watched John straighten my skirt and realized what I dismissed as contract duties were pure instincts. He recalled my menstrual dates, dimmed lights for my drawing, waited outside labs and storms. All this tenderness beneath butterfly emblems was never clauses but his unspoken heart for 3 years. Like now, he crouched to tie his shoelaces, hair brushing my knee, exposing the fresh ink on his nape, an emerging butterfly flanked by a tiny soft, matching the tattoo on my wrist. Turns out in what I called a mutual benefit deal, he'd long etched our future into his core. The spiral staircase in the Wilson family's mansion smelled of sandalwood. I gripped John's suit sleeve, staring at the butterfly stepping stones, antiques misses. Wilson found in Italy, each wing pattern unique. Rarely did I venture upstairs in 3 years. Now his palms sweated but stayed firmly at my back, guarding against a stumble. Johnny? His mother's voice drifted down with vintage rose perfume. Aunt Brown said you brought Sophie to visit me, why hide in the stairwell? John's body tensed, his fingers tracing a reassuring circle on my waist. Mom, Sophie's exhausted early in pregnancy. He looked up, eyes crinkling behind glasses with unprecedented warmth. Didn't you mention showing her my childhood butterfly specimens? Mrs. Wilson descended with her carved cane, gaze landing on our clasped hands. Oh, so you finally learned to protect someone? She chuckled, crow's feet brimming with mischief. When you crushed Sophie's butterfly hairclip years ago, I knew this girl would trip you up. Memory flashed to our wedding day. John ground my clip to dust in his office but sent a custom jewelry set the next day, every wing vein matching my drawings. Now his ears flushed, throat bobbing. Mom, you misremember, that was an accident. Accident? She led me to a brocade sofa, pressing a butterfly pillow into my hands. I think someone used it as an excuse to get close. She eyed John, who knelt brewing osmanthus tea by the coffee table, deft as a homemaker. Haven't seen you pour tea for anyone in 10 years, not since your father's hospitalization. Steam from the pot fogged John's glasses. He slid a celadone cup toward me, water perfectly at my preferred 45 degrees Celsius. Sophie has a cold stomach, osmanthus tea warms it. He paused, thumb tracing the cup's butterfly motif. Fired in the same kiln as the mansion's stepping stones. Mrs. Wilson suddenly took my hand, grazing my wrist tattoo. When Johnny insisted on Soft John engraved in the wedding band, I knew he was serious. The steam from the milk blurred my vision as I gazed at the butterfly tattoo peeking from his shirt collar, identical to the one beneath my collarbone, inked on the day we got married. Back then, I thought it symbolized a contract, only now do I realize he'd sneaked my birthday date into its veins while the artist mixed the pigment. John, I clutched the corner of the agreement, the paper rustling faintly. Are you being kind to me because of the child? He froze, the milk cup clinking softly on the nightstand. 3 years ago in the hospital, your father held my hand and said Sophie is afraid of the dark, leave a nightlight on. Suddenly kneeling to meet my eyes, his glasses glinting faintly behind the lenses, the contract had just taken effect. I could have hired a nanny, but I chose to guard the study myself because the clause requires maintaining a married couple's image. I cut in, nails digging into my palm. Just like you accompany me to the hospital every week for checkups. It's not concern, but fear my father would discover our marriage was a transaction. The sound of snowflakes tapping against the glass sharpened. John's fingertips brushed lightly over the butterfly tattoo on my wrist. Sophie, remember? Last year when you collapsed in the lab, I carried you into the ER shouting my wife has low blood sugar. He paused, thumb tracing the band mark on my ring finger. The contract had 6 months left. I could have called you an employee. Memories flashed back to that stormy night. I was sketching tissue slides at the lab bench, waking in John's arms, his suit jacket draped over me and smelling of my lavender diffuser. An ER nurse mistook us for newlyweds. He didn't deny it, only gripped my hand tighter, whispering, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." That was because I didn't want to be your John anymore. Suddenly, he clasped my hand against his chest, his heartbeat drumming fast. From the moment you drew that first butterfly in my office, I wanted to hold on to you, not with a contract, but with my heart. He pulled an iron box from his inner pocket, filled with neatly aligned butterfly hair clips, each a replica of the ones I'd lost over the years. Did you think I really crushed yours? I had craftsmen make 10 identical copies. I stared at the clips glimmering faintly, recalling how every time he returned from a trip, a new hair clip appeared on my vanity. John claimed he picked it up casually, but they were all secretly collected. At the bottom lay a silver butterfly, its veins etched with tiny script, 2019, March 15th, the day we first met. Sophie, his voice turned hoarse, as if choked, 3 years ago in that ward, seeing you shield the ultrasound report, I panicked you'd vanish with the child, like losing my mother. His fingertip traced the old scar on my waist from a lab fall that stormy night. So I trapped you with a contract, not knowing I was the one trapped. The snow stopped, sunlight piercing the clouds to strike the butterfly wind chime in the nursery, chiming crisply. My eyes found red veins in John's gaze, and suddenly I spotted a notebook poking from his inner pocket, its cover bearing a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, identical to my graduation design, a sketch I'd thought long lost. You knew I was pregnant all along, didn't you? I pointed to the silver chain on his wrist. When the pendant shifted, I glimpsed baby, Daddy's waiting etched inside. From the moment I sneaked off for the test 3 months ago, you were preparing. He remained silent, flipping the notebook open to pages pasted with every pregnancy strip I'd used, ultrasound reports, folic acid receipts, even nursery blueprints annotated Sophie's favorite begonia pattern. The final entry was penned in ink. Sophie, I don't want the contract, I want you and the child, as Mrs. Wilson. Tears clouded my sight as I gazed at this man who'd concealed his heart within butterfly emblems, daring finally to admit that what I saw as duty had always been his instinct. He remembered my menstrual dates, dimmed lights during my sketches, waited outside labs during storms, not from the contract, but because I love you, he whispered, his voice feather soft. Since you said in the art room butterfly veins are maps to freedom, I've loved you. Removing his glasses, eyes glistening with moisture, Sophie, give me a chance. Let me prove with my life that it's not the child tying me, it's you, always you. The nursery wind chime jingled again. My eyes fell on the burn scar on John's hand, from brewing ginger tea last time, and I saw love hidden in details, nightlights left burning, quietly collected butterfly clips, his meticulous knowledge of pregnancy taboos. Perhaps it was time to shed obsession with the contract and trust this man who carved vows into butterfly tattoos. Just then, he gently wiped my tears, his fingertip tracing my lips' curve more genuinely than any grand promise. And I finally dared speak the words buried for 3 years, nestled in his embrace, John, I love you too. The biological clock at the hillside villa struck 5:30 a.m. sharp. Rubbing my eyes, I pushed open the bedroom door to clatter of spatulas. John wore Aunt Brown's floral apron, frowning at a frying pan as grease fogged his gold-rimmed glasses. His suit sleeves were rolled to his elbows, exposing scribbled notes on pregnancy diets from last night. Awake? He scrambled to turn off the stove, plating a char-edged egg in a butterfly-patterned dish. First attempt at a soft-boiled yolk, his ears flushed as he wiped the plate's rim. Aunt Brown said you like it runny. Milk bubbled on the induction stove. I studied the flour smudges on his apron, left over from his disastrous attempt at whole wheat bread, unlike his usual sharp-suited self. His notebook lay open on the table to week 6 dietary restrictions, the highlighted no raw/cold foods beside a crooked butterfly doodle, its tail arcs mirroring his signature flourish. I could order takeout. No, he interrupted, passing me warmed lemon water with a sticky note reading vitamins, 7 a.m. The doctor said takeout spices are too harsh for the baby. He paused, eyes sweeping my wrist tattoo. By the way, Aunt Brown went to the temple for a protection charm today. I'll take you to the prenatal visit this morning. During the ultrasound, John suddenly pulled out his phone, hovering over the screen to record. The doctor said to document every stage, he murmured, fingers delicate as handling fragile glass. In 3 months we'll know the gender. Will the baby prefer butterflies or begonias? Watching the tiny embryo on screen, I recalled last night's closet discovery, infant clothes pockets stuffed with printed notes saying Dad will protect you forever, signed with a butterfly sketch identical to the original in his study safe. John, the doctor chuckled, you're the most nervous expectant dad I've seen. She pointed to the crumpled prenatal report in his grasp. Last visit you asked about side-sleeping pillows, now studying crib orientations? His ears crimson as he nudged slipping glasses. The crib faces the window, his voice feather soft. So Sophie sees the begonias while feeding at night. On the drive home, John detoured to a bookstore, returning with stacks of parenting guides, leather seats dusted with ink scent. The bookmark in Pregnancy Nutrition Guide flagged the sea-based tofu soup page. Newborn Care Handbook featured my photo on its flyleaf, snapped last year under the wutong tree where I smiled, him declaring the lighting's perfect. Steamed sea bass for dinner? He steered, thumb stroking the butterfly emblem on the wheel. The books say fish are rich in DHA, turning, eyes bright behind lenses. I had Mr. Smith fetch the freshest catch. Aunt Brown promised to teach me filleting. Kitchen air tingled with ginger as I leaned on the doorway, watching John clumsily tie the apron. His surgical gloves were inside out, yet he used tweezers to extract bones, fingertips pricked and bleeding onto the board. Lifting a bone-free fillet triumphantly, see? All gone. Late that night, I found John sketching nursery designs in the study, shirt collar open to expose a butterfly tattoo mirroring mine. Blueprints showed a double-door closet, one compartment labeled Sophie's exclusive, no entry in his rare rounded script for butterfly clips. What are you looking at? He spun around, shutting the notebook hastily, but a plastic-wrapped pregnancy strip, the one I discarded 3 months ago, slipped out. That day in the lab, his voice trembled, I saw you crying in the stairwell after the test and knew. My gaze caught the shadows under his eyes. This fierce businessman had cancelled pre-dawn meetings, jammed his schedule full, yet note margins read Sophie's nap, do not disturb. His inner pocket always held mints, not contractual duty, but for sudden nausea. John, I whispered, tracing the band-aid on his knuckle. You don't need to push so hard. He clasped my hand against his chest, pulse steady. 3 years ago in the ward, I missed your first bout of morning sickness. He watched the begonia tree outside. This time, I won't miss a second, from the first heartbeat to their first dad. Night breeze lifted curtains, revealing a crescent moon. The notebook's latest entry read, Sophie, 28. Loves butterflies. The crabapple blossoms outside the window were blown off by the wind, and a single petal happened to land on the blank page of the specimen album. John suddenly flipped to the last page, revealing a yellowed sketch. It was the butterfly I drew in the hospital, with my father's medicine stains on its wings. Your father said that the veins of this butterfly are like an electrocardiogram, the trajectory of life. He suddenly smiled, his eyes behind the glasses curving into crescents. Later, I realized that you are my life's trajectory, the most effective medicine in all my treatment plans. At the bottom of the password box lay a broken diamond from my lost wedding ring. There was a note next to it, July 15, 2022. Sophie smashed her wedding ring on a stormy night. I picked up all the broken diamonds, waiting for the day when she's willing to wear it again. It turned out that during the argument 3 years ago, he wasn't being cold. He was just afraid I'd see his red-rimmed eyes and know that he had already signed the contract but drew a butterfly protecting a chrysalis at the signature. So, I looked at the silver bracelet on his wrist. The words "Baby, Dad is waiting for you" inside the pendant had been worn shiny. You weren't being nice to me just to fulfill the contract. It's because I love you, he took over, gently wiping the tear from the corner of my eye with his fingertips. From the moment you said in the studio, a butterfly needs to struggle on its own when breaking out of the cocoon. Helping it will prevent its wings from hardening. I fell in love with your stubbornness, your tenderness, every little detail about you. He suddenly leaned down and planted a gentle kiss on my forehead. Sophie, tear up that contract. What I've always wanted isn't a 3-year marriage, but a lifetime of flying together like butterflies, I finished for him, looking at the photo of us on the bookshelf. The background was the butterfly stepping stone at the Wilson family's old mansion. Just like what your mother wrote in her diary, once a butterfly chooses its habitat, it won't leave. John suddenly picked me up and walked towards the nursery. The crabapple patterns on the wall glowed softly under the light. He pointed at the chandelier above the crib, in the shape of my favorite butterfly, with each wing able to light up separately. Look, he flipped the switch, and the butterfly lamp cast colorful spots of light. When the baby cries in the future, we'll tell him that these are Mom and Dad's butterflies dancing. Looking at the dancing light spots in his eyes, I suddenly realized that those butterfly elements I once regarded as shackles of the contract had long become marks of love. He used butterfly specimens to record every moment of mine, the butterfly emblem to safeguard our marriage, and the butterfly lamp to light up the baby's future. And I finally dared to believe that this man's love was never a transaction but a crush that took root from the first sight and deep-seated affection after 3 years of misunderstanding. The night breeze carried the fragrance of crabapple blossoms. John placed his palm on my abdomen, and the warmth of his body seeped through my thin shirt, like feeling the rhythm of life. Leaning on his shoulder and hearing his rapid heartbeat, I suddenly understood that the so-called butterfly breaking out of the cocoon was never a one-sided flight but two souls getting closer and healing each other in time. And our story was just beginning, at this moment when the misunderstanding was cleared up, in the future where love and trust intertwined. The air conditioning in the obstetrics clinic was too cold. I stared at the numbers on the blood pressure monitor, and my cuffs were so tight that it hurt. When John's phone vibrated for the 3rd time in his suit pocket, he finally answered it, but his brows were furrowed all the time, and his eyes never left the sheet I was clutching tightly. Postpone the meeting. Let Mr. Smith speak on my behalf. Mrs. Wilson's blood pressure is a bit high, the doctor frowned, looking at the report. Coupled with the fluctuating progesterone level, I suggest she be hospitalized for observation today. She turned to John. Mr. Wilson, your wife needs absolute rest at present. John's fingers suddenly tightened, and I could hear his knuckles cracking. Arrange a VIP ward and call the head of the obstetrics department and the dietitian. He took out his phone and quickly sent a message. The butterfly emblem on his tie clip flashed a cold light under the light. Also, contact Professor Zhang to fly here from Beijing. He's an authority on scarred uteruses. When the nurse wheeled in a wheelchair, John suddenly squatted down and tied my slippers for me. "Don't be afraid," the warmth of his palm seeped through my cotton socks. "Last week, Aunt Brown cooked yam porridge. I'll ask her to send it twice a day. You said it made your stomach feel better." Outside the floor-to-ceiling window of the VIP ward was the sycamore forest of the Wilson family's old mansion. I watched John pacing back and forth in the ward, the cuffs of his suit pants stained with dust from running up the stairs just now. He was having a video call with the attending doctor, speaking quickly but clearly, completely in the state of being in control in the business world. But when he mentioned the fetus is stable, his voice suddenly softened. "Mr. Wilson, you'll exhaust yourself like this." The head nurse looked at the dark circles under his eyes and handed him a cup of hot milk. "Your wife needs emotional stability." He took the milk but blew on it to cool it down before handing it to me. His fingertips brushed past the butterfly tattoo on the back of my hand. "Remember?" His voice was as soft as a feather. "Last year, when you stayed up all night in the laboratory, I secretly installed a timed reminder software on your computer. Every hour, a butterfly pop-up window saying, 'Sophie, it's time to rest,' would appear." Looking at the steam on the surface of the milk, I suddenly remembered that stormy night when I was drawing an embryo development diagram. John silently turned off the harsh white light for me and replaced it with a warm yellow butterfly lamp. Now that lamp was on the bedside table in the nursery, next to the baby massage manual he newly learned. "Sophie," he suddenly held my hand and placed it on his Adam's apple. Just now in the meeting room, I stared at the butterfly logo on the contract and suddenly remembered the anatomical diagram you first drew for me. He paused, and his fingertips brushed past the mark of the wedding ring on my ring finger. At that time, I thought, how wonderful it would be if I could spend my whole life with this girl who could draw butterflies. The fetal heart monitor made regular ticking sounds, as if echoing his heartbeat. John's phone vibrated again. This time, it was a message from Mr. Smith. "Mr. was said to wait for your signature on the merger case." He didn't even look at it and locked the screen, turning the phone over on the bedside table, with the phone case with the butterfly emblem facing me, like a silent promise. "Go deal with your work." I looked at his wrinkled shirt. "I'm much better now." "No," he suddenly sat on the edge of the bed and held my hand on my abdomen. The calluses on his fingertips brushed past the tattoo on my wrist. 3 years ago in the operating room, after I signed the abortion consent form, I hid in the stairwell and vomited so badly that I couldn't stand up. His voice trembled. "This time, even if the sky falls, I won't leave you for a single step." Suddenly, a gap was torn in my memory. I remembered that on the day of my discharge from the hospital, half of a torn ultrasound picture stuck out of John's suit pocket, and there were small butterflies drawn on each piece of the torn paper. At this moment, the way he lowered his head to kiss my abdomen was as gentle as touching the most precious treasure in the world, and his eyes behind the glasses were glistening with tears. Late at night, John was dozing off beside the bed, still firmly holding my hand. Looking at the butterfly tattoo peeking out from under his suit jacket, overlapping with the one under my collarbone in the moonlight, I suddenly heard him murmur in his sleep, "Sophie, don't leave." When the nurse came in to change the dressing, I saw John's phone screen light up. The lock screen was our wedding photo. I was wearing a butterfly veil, and he was smiling like a teenager. The latest photo in the album was taken in the ward today. He was holding my hand on the fetal heart monitor, with the caption, "My butterfly, my light." At 3 o'clock in the morning, the attending doctor came for a ward round. John immediately woke up and instinctively pulled me into his arms. "How are the indicators?" His voice was hoarse from just waking up, but after hearing stable, he let out a long breath and gently stroked the top of my head with his fingertips. "Go to sleep. I'm here." When the first rays of morning light appeared, John's suit jacket was covering me, carrying the smell of cedar mixed with the hospital's disinfectant. Looking at his profile in the morning light, with the stubble showing a bluish-black color, he made me feel more at ease than ever. It turned out that true love wasn't a solemn vow, but when a crisis came, there was only you and the child in his eyes, and the determination to put down all his glory and protect you in the most clumsy way. Just like at this moment, he was holding the cotton swab after my blood draw and counting for me, "Press for 5 minutes and it won't hurt anymore." His fingertips traced the lines on my palm, as if confirming my real existence. And I finally dared to believe that this man who engraved his vow with the butterfly emblem had long regarded me and the child as the most important contract in his life, not for 3 years, but for a lifetime. The butterfly embroidery on the wedding dress was digging into my collarbone, making it hurt. I stared at myself in the mirror. There were 30 silver butterflies on the edge of the pearl veil, and each vein was drawn according to the method in John's mother's diary. Aunt Brown was wiping her tears behind me. Back then, Mr. Wilson didn't even let us take wedding photos. Now, he's even paved the lawn of the hillside villa into the shape of a butterfly's wings. The sound of the violin came from outside the glass door, playing my favorite by the Butterfly Spring. John was wearing a silver gray suit, with newly customized double butterfly intertwined cufflinks. He was standing under the flower arch, talking to John's mother. The sunlight filtered through the sycamore leaves and cast mottled shadows on his glasses, just like the broken light that fell on the butterfly specimen through the skylight when I first saw him in the studio 3 years ago. Nervous? John's mother adjusted my veil for me, and her fingertips brushed past the butterfly tattoo under my collarbone. Back then, when John's father proposed, he used an injured swallowtail butterfly and said, "Butterfly wings need to protect each other." She suddenly smiled, and the fine lines at the corners of her eyes were filled with sunlight. Now it seems that my son is much more romantic than his father. The moment the wedding march sounded, John turned around, and his eyes behind the glasses sparkled like stars. Half of a silver bracelet stuck out of his suit pocket, with a spreading winged butterfly as the pendant, shining in the sunlight in response to the one on my wrist. When he reached out to take my hand, I felt the calluses on his palm, left from setting up the nursery all night. Sophie Johnson, his voice echoed on the lawn, mixed with the fragrance of crabapple blossoms. 3 years ago, I trapped you with a contract, thinking I could hold on to the so-called not losing. But I didn't know that true protection. He took out a velvet box, inside which was the remounted wedding ring, with the broken diamonds forming a pattern of a butterfly breaking out of the cocoon. Is to let you spread your wings and fly side by side with me. There was an intake of breath from the guests. I recognized some of the Wilson family's executives and the attending doctor of my father before his death. John suddenly knelt on one knee, and the wedding ring glowed faintly in the sunlight. There were new words engraved inside the ring: Sophie and John, breaking out of the cocoon, October 28, 2023, the day of our make-up wedding. This time, there are no terms, no expiration date. He looked at my red-rimmed eyes, his Adam's apple bobbed. There's only me, John Wilson, asking you as a husband. He paused, and his fingertips brushed past the tattoo on my wrist. Let me spend the rest of my life turning the contract marriage into destiny. Tears suddenly blurred my vision. I remembered the day of the divorce 3 years ago when he said in the Obstetrics and Gynecology clinic, "I won't miss this time." At this moment, the warmth of his palm seeped through the wedding dress, warmer than any contract. When I stretched out my hand, he put the ring on my finger, and the butterfly wings just covered the needle-hole scar left by the abortion back then. Now, I declare, just as the officiant started to speak, John suddenly took out a yellow piece of paper from his suit pocket, the divorce agreement that he had torn up and glued back together. Before the wedding starts, I have something to do. His fingertips traced the signature of Chugueha, and he suddenly smiled. No, it's something John Wilson has to do. The pieces of paper fluttered in the autumn wind, like countless butterflies flapping their wings. John looked at the falling paper pages, his voice as soft as a feather. 3 years ago, I signed this paper, thinking I could control my feelings. But the moment I saw you protecting the ultrasound report, he held my hand and placed it on his heart. This place has long been filled with the butterflies you drew. The guests burst into applause. John's mother wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief, and Mr. Smith was holding a phone in the corner, recording, with the camera aimed at our overlapping wedding rings. When John lowered his head to kiss me, I heard him whisper softly, "Actually, from the moment you drew the first butterfly in my office, there's been a divorce agreement in my safe that will never take effect." The wedding banquet was held in the garden of the hillside villa. The butterfly-shaped table lamps cast warm light. Touching the silver butterflies on the wedding dress, I suddenly found that there were small words engraved on the inside of each wing, in John's penmanship: first met on March 15, 2019, first time making ginger soup on July 8, 2020, confirmed pregnancy on September 5, 2023, all important dates for us. Is the baby kicking you? John put his ear to my abdomen and listened for a while, his ear tips turning red. He seemed to move just now when I was taking the oath. He suddenly took out a notebook from his suit pocket and flipped to the latest page, on which there was an ultrasound photo pasted, and next to it was written, "Mom and Dad's little butterfly has its own wedding today." The night breeze carried the sweet smell of the cake. On the top layer of the 3-tiered butterfly cake, there was a model of our butterfly tattoos. When John cut the cake, he suddenly pulled out a note hidden inside, the one I secretly stuffed in last night. "John Wilson, actually I've long known that the mint candies in your suit pocket are the taste my mother made before her death." He looked up at me, his eyes behind the glasses curving into crescents. "So that's why you deliberately wrote divorce agreement as divorce nonsense agreement on the day the contract expired?" His fingertips brushed past the sweat stains on the back of my hand. "Silly girl, I've long regarded every little mistake of yours as a reason not to let go." When the wedding was over, John took me into the nursery. The light spots of the butterfly lamp danced on the crib. He pointed at the photo wall on the wall, from the butterfly sketch in college to the wedding photo today, with an empty space in the middle, written "The little butterfly is born on May 20, 2024. Aunt Brown said there should be the parents' wedding photos in the nursery." He stroked the wedding ring on my ring finger. "So that when the baby is born, he'll know that Mom and Dad's love is stronger than any contract." Looking at the silver bracelet on his wrist, with the words "Baby, Dad is waiting for you" inside the pendant already worn shiny, I suddenly realized that those butterfly elements I once regarded as shackles had long become marks of love. John used butterfly specimens to record our past, the butterfly emblem to safeguard the present, and the butterfly lamp to light up the future. And I finally understood that true marriage was never the bondage of a contract but two souls getting closer and healing each other. Just like at this moment, he gently hugged me and listened to the sound of crabapple leaves falling outside the window. I knew that those misunderstandings and pains had long settled in time, turning into the spring mud that nourished happiness. And our story would continue to be written in the light of the butterfly breaking out of the cocoon, with love as the contract and the heart as the proof, forever, forever.